This is Network Zero, and we are on episode number 3. And I am one of your regular hosts, Chris, and I am joined by tonight David. Hello.
Hello.
And our topic for this episode, just so we're not just going through every single core book anyway, because I need to go back through Mage 2nd edition yet, is we'll go back and look at some of the more classic New Order Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness books and talk about them because they're all still really relevant. And so the topic for this episode is Inferno, which is, I think, a favourite of for Chronicles of Darkness and, well, what was New Order Darkness. So the plan with this is really to look at how you can make use of demons in your Mortals games, primarily. Because I don't think we've really got the time to go down the rabbit hole of explaining all the nuances between demons and how they interact with the different powers of werewolves. But this should be really a good primer of ideas, which could then actually even lead into, main stories with a particular splat. So before we get into that, let's think what's been going on then, David. We've had Gen Con's been on. Gen Con's been and gone. Have you looked at the brochure?
I know Promethean, the created 2nd edition, I think the PDF of that is out now.
Yeah, that's it's kind of like the preview edition, so you can buy it as PDF. It's a way of they'll collate all the errata, and then at which point they'll make all the corrections, and then at a later point print on demand will be available.
So you usually get an updated version of the PDF as well once those corrections have been made.
So. Yeah. We've also got Chronicles of Darkness Dark Eras is out, Dark Eras Companion is out. Tales of the Dark Eras is a anthology of short stories which ties in with Chronicles of Darkness Dark Eras. So that's been announced. We've also got, of course, coming up in the year still, that's been known for a while, is Changeling the Lost 2nd edition. We've got Hunter the Vigil 2nd edition, we've known about that. Promethean the Created 2nd edition, which is just out now. We've got 1,000 Years of Night, which is for Vampire the Requiem, which is about how to play Elders, and how to play the tools that can help run Chronicles about Elders. Signs of Sorcery, which is it was originally titled Shards of Power, which covers physical and tangible expressions of magic. So sacraments, magical tools, grimoires, the creation of archmages and more. So it's kind of like Sanctum and Sigil and Tome of Grimoires, I think, from 1st edition Mage the Awakening. Hurt Locker, which is 2nd edition for Chronicles of Darkness, which is going to be is about combat and getting how to represent violence in a way that's interesting, just rather than just running through the numbers and rolling the dice. We also have announced a few things. We have Dice the Sin Eaters 2nd edition. Thank you. I cannot wait for that to come out because I've run my first session of Geist. I've got a few issues. One of my players had to drop out due to job life stuff, so I'm having to pause the Chronicle while we get a new player in. But first experience of actually running Geist is great. So 2nd edition will be great for that. We also have the Crossover Chronicle, which is a true Chronicle that allows that feature. The main feature is that it features almost all splats of Chronicles of Darkness.
Wow.
So the last time you kind of had something like that was when they did the Chicago book for New World of Darkness. But that wasn't really true crossover. It's just that you had the big 3, Vampire, Mage, and Werewolf, all in the one setting book. From what I can tell of this, what it's looking like is we'll have Vampire, Mage, Werewolf. I'm going to guess looks like Hunter, and possibly I don't know, maybe Changeling or maybe something else involved. So that'll be an interesting book. And then, of course, we have announced the title for Deviant. So it's now Deviant the Renegades.
I'm looking forward to this more than any other product Onyx Path are putting out. I'm really, really interested to see what they do with it. Dave Brookshaw's ideas in terms of the inspiration behind it. It's great. And I actually think that I've seen some people take issue with the subtitle, The Renegades, because it's quite often singular in terms of Beast the Primordial, Vampire the Requiem, although Geist the Sin Eater's already had the plural. But I think that the Renegades gives a really clear sense of what the compelling story trajectory is for that game line. So, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of good game lines coming out. I mean, Changeling Lost is in the hands of, I think David Hill's doing the development on that. And I think,
yes.
I don't have too many worries about that. There's a few things I've seen and heard on forums. We'll see what the final version looks like. I mean, a lot of open development was done with it. I think if they misstep with it, I think the fan base is really strong for that game, so they've got to live up to the first edition quite a lot. Hunt of the Vigil second edition, I think that's Monica Valentinelli. I can never get her name right. I'm so bad at that. So she's in charge of development of that.
That's going to be Slasher Chronicles, I think.
Yes.
So yeah, right. I think World of Darkness Slasher is one of the strongest, alongside Inferno, of the new World of Darkness source books. And yeah, so if they're taking down that route, I'm also very, very interested in that.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, Hunter just kind of expands the strength of Chronicles of Darkness, which is, the Mortals level of things, and it doesn't put too much extra in. You can play it still pretty much as Mortals. It'll be interesting to read Promethean the Created, because it'll be interesting to see how they've made the game more playable, because it was often felt hampered in some ways. Again, there's possibly a slight issue there, because one of the things in first edition Promethean was you could play as one of the Centimani, which were the kind of the Prometheans that didn't want to become human. They reveled in their inhumanity,
and they experimented on themselves and would become kind of physically monstrous as well as.
So I believe they're now. I have a feeling that they're possibly not playable anymore. I won't know until I read the book. I need to. I've got too many books. I've got to read Mage first anyway. So that's something I'll catch up on. I mean, Promethean I've always used as kind of a source of antagonist, but if it becomes more playable, that's good. But again, I don't want the danger of the Centimani being, relegated to just being, a cardboard cutout kind of villains and not nuanced in some ways.
Yeah, I'd planned to start a Promethean Chronicle, but fell through for various reasons, including finishing my PhD. But one of the contradictions I wanted to set up. So the idea would be that a group of Prometheans has been helped out by a figure who may once have been a Promethean or just as sympathetic to them, but are driven out of the city by the mob. And basically go on the road, and they hear stories, and it's loosely based on Clive Barker's Cabal, which became Nightbreed, of a place where the monsters can go and settle, and that would be somewhere particularly desolate that's not populated, and even though you would have a wasteland growing, they wouldn't care. And what I wanted to set up there is having various different factions, ones who argued that this was just staving off the inevitable, something awful was going to happen if they carried on. And others who would say, humanity, if you rejected you, they don't want you. Why would you want to become one of them? Embrace what you are. You're something different, and that's not necessarily a problem. So I wanted to have the Centimani very much a kind of a different school of thought to the kind of overarching notion of the pilgrimage towards becoming human.
Yeah, it'll be interesting what they've done with that.
I think they are introducing alchemists, and they're going to be quite a big part of it. So I think they take on the role of antagonists to a certain extent. So humans who want to draw on the power, I think the Azoth of the
it's Azoth.
So
Azoth and Pyros,
and they're essentially trying to hunt Promethean. So as long as the alchemists have been made interesting and compelling, I think that they could function just as well as the Centimani in some respects.
It'll be interesting what they add in, what the chronicle for Geist of Sin Eaters will be. It'll be a good book because, again, once you've got Geist and you've got Mage and you've got Werewolf, you pretty much have got the whole board covered on the other worlds, the worlds beyond, because you've got the spirit world, the Hissel, which is like, the world of animistic spirits. You've got Mage, which covers astral realms and the supernal, and that's more, the different levels of dreaming and how that reflects into our world, and the spirits that come from there, like the Gotia, which is, obviously one type of demon, which we're not going to talk about today. And then once you've got Geist in there, you've got the underworld, and you've got the lower depths, the autochthonous depths and domains, and of course the wonderful ghost known as Kerberos. So once you've got those three books, you've covered a good amount of the other realms of Chronicles of Darkness. And I have to say, sorting out stuff for Geist, I feel Geist is actually the best crossover chronicle, because I think a Sin Eater can interact with quite a lot of characters quite well, because everyone gets haunted by something, by someone they've killed, or someone that they miss, or they have some reason to go back into the underworld to plunder it for lost knowledge. So,
do we know who's developing the second edition of Geist?
Not yet. We know it's not Dave Brookshaw, because he corrected me on that one in person. But I wish he could do it, but he's got a lot on his plate. It would be, I have high hopes for that. What else have we had going on then? So that's everything that's of interest for us from Gen Con. Other stuff will be talked about on Darker Days, I'm sure. We obviously did our interview with Simon Berman for Darker Days about the Strix Publishing and the book of artwork, which was by Jason Souls, and that got funded, which was good. And then gaming wise, what have we been doing? I played a big game of War Machine Hordes on Sunday, which was good. It was massive.
So 2 players on each side, or
2 players on each side? Yeah. It was kind of a draw in the end. I think it was still kind of. It was my 3rd game with the new rules, but it was a large game, so it takes a while to get through stuff. And yeah, like I say, I ran the first session of Geist, which was quite enjoyable, but we're having to find a new player. So what I'm planning on doing is, once we've got the new player in place and the new character in place, is we just retcon the previous session, and I write their character in where the previous character was, and just assume their character was in there already and did all the same stuff, and then we carry on as normal, because I don't want to reset and reboot or assume that we lost the character for some weird reason. I'm just going to do a retcon, because often that is the easiest thing to do.
And in terms of getting Chronicles up and running and keeping them going, I think sometimes the easiest thing to do is also the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, it means whatever plot you've established and stuff is still valid, and the other players can just go, oh, well, your character did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then you did this, blah, 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 blah. And it can already help that new player or new character feel embedded into the story. But yeah, Geist I would say felt kind of a bit relaxing to begin with, because you don't have characters that need to go off and feed all the time and don't have to, it's kind of like Mage in that respect. I think Mage can be, a bit more relaxing because you are still playing humans to an extent.
Yeah.
You're not like a wolf that has to go off and the wolf must hunt. These are poor people that see the dead all the time and have to tune it out. And Paris seems a good setting. So Mark, who plays in it, said he immediately felt in the zone for it because we watched the Ghost Adventures special that's about the Paris catacombs called, I think it was called Necropolis. Yeah. No, it was. What was it called? It was called Netherworld or something like that. But you can find it online or something. And he already had in his head a picture of what the Paris catacombs looked like when we were running through the story. So,
have you seen the film As Above, So Below?
Yeah, I think it's quite good actually.
I really like it. But I mean that's a take on the catacombs, obviously, and then goes down. Which links quite nicely to the theme of today's episode. Basically, go through the catacombs and into hell.
Yeah. So gaming wise for yourself, well, you've been playing Dark Age, is that right?
I haven't been playing Dark Age.
I've been
wanting to. I can't even paint Dark Age yet because at the moment there's been a real difficulty in getting hold of the miniatures in the UK. But I've been assured by the distributor who I've got in touch with. I've been trying to get these figures since May. That the issue is being resolved shortly, and so I'm looking forward to once the figures start hitting the UK market. They've got a 2-player starter set that's out in November, which looks like it's going to be fantastic value for money and should be a good starting point. I've got people down at my local wargaming club who want to try it out. And I've been sharing pictures of the Shadowcast Dragiri, which seem to have a kind of... it's difficult to describe them without just relying on lots of other IP, but there are elements in their design that are reminiscent of the Dark Eldar, the Drow, etc. And they're very much based on fear and taking over enemy units and sneaking and etc. So that looks really good. So in the meantime, I've been playing lots and lots of War Machine Mark III and losing, but really enjoying it. I've so far lost to Crix. I play as Crix, Retribution, Kador, and Legion of Everblight. So I'm still kind of making the mental transition from Mark II Crix, which was very much an infantry horde, to Mark III, where I'm playing more Warjacks than I ever have before.
It's great. I like using more war beasts. It's with my Gator Men, it was just full on giant gators, hilarious.
The last game I played on Thursday, I almost won, and there was a misunderstanding of the terms of the scenario, so we're having a rematch on Thursday.
Right.
But I managed to get Deathjack and a Kraken on a hill and put Veil of Ash on, I think, or Cloak of Ash, sorry, on Deathjack, which takes them up to a ridiculously high defense, and was working my way through the opponent's army, and it was incredibly satisfying to have jacks that earned their points, which didn't always happen with Crix in Mark II, if I'm going to be honest.
I'm trying to think what else is interesting. So obviously I got my Kickstarter reward for Fallen Frontiers through, and the miniatures are excellent. They are, I would say, they're up there with Kingdom Death on miniature quality, and I think actually their resins might be superior to a certain extent. And they're 35mm, so they're a lot bigger. So I had a picture I put up on various places. The basic humans stand like a head taller than a GW figure, and that means the bigger non-humanoids stand a full 35mm tall, so like a full 2 heads taller than like a GW Space Marine. So they're not, that's the thing. It's like I'm keen on detail, but I don't want it cluttered to the point where all you're going to do is paint and put a wash on it, which is, my opinion of GW stuff these days, and certain other companies.
Can be too busy.
Yeah, you've got to have some room to do a little bit of art on like, how you paint the armor plates and stuff. So let's actually get into our main topic. As always, we got to talk about gaming. I think people enjoy us talking about gaming. We're going to talk about Iron Kingdoms in future at some point. So Inferno. Inferno came out a while ago. Let me just have a look at how long ago that was. 2009. Wow. Okay. So when I finished my PhD, great. So Inferno gives us a smorgasbord of how to treat demons of the Inferno. So the Inferno is a distinct realm within the World of Darkness cosmology. It is a realm where all of our vices kind of become real, in the sense that they give birth to and fuel and feed demons. So the demons of the Inferno could be considered to be akin to the demons of the Abrahamic religions. So obviously Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. But also you could easily equate the demons of the Inferno to other religions through the associated lenses. You could easily say they're demons of Buddhism, that they could be the demons of the Thousand Hells from Chinese, like what would it be? That would be Buddhism, I think, the Thousand Hells. Or is that with Shinto? I can't quite remember the difference between which one the Thousand Hells, but I know it's that played a big feature in that would have been like in Wraith the Oblivion. They used the Thousand Hells as the underworld of like the Dark Kingdom of Jade. So if you want some ideas, you could always plunder that book for what some of the demons of a different culture would look like. Just recast these ghosts as demons.
Could also link it to the Michael Moorcock inspired Chaos Gods, the idea that and it does state
oh yes, definitely.
Not in those sense, but the idea that rather than demons being created before humanity, or having that sort of relationship of jealousy of having been displaced, if we go back to Milton's Paradise Lost, of being no longer the chosen, but instead demons are actually created by human vice, that before humans there were no demons. So demons are very much a product of humanity rather than something that's preying on it, which again I think could be quite unsettling as a concept if you wanted to go down that route.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that is a big feature of what Inferno gets into, is really, I guess, is the chicken and egg kind of scenario of what a demon is and where do they come from. I think the first thing to say, because obviously this is a New World of Darkness book, is that while it is for New World of Darkness, not Chronicles of Darkness, so it's first edition, essentially, I don't really think, rules-wise, it would be that difficult to switch over to the new rule set, because obviously demons in this book are presented as using the same rules as spirits, and that means they use Numina. And if anything, Chronicles of Darkness has, to an even greater extent, created better systems to represent, the spirits and the spirit realms and their entities. And that means you can plunder Mage 2nd edition and you can plunder Werewolf 2nd edition for ideas. And of course, when it comes out, you can plunder Geist 2nd edition for other things. And we'll get into why that's most really relevant when we talk about a certain bit in Inferno. I think the only things you would mostly have to be in particular aware of is converting over vestments when you play the Possessed, which is in a later chapter in Inferno. and also when I think dealing with just when it talks about morality and how when a character drops in morality, how that impacts the evolution of a demon or how it impacts a possession. You may want to reassess those rules in light of how the integrity rule system works, and maybe you're more looking for particular breaking points. So maybe a regular break, a normal breaking point for a human is one thing, but a breaking point that's more personal to a character may have greater impact on the evolution of the demon that's haunting that person. So that's just my general opinion on how to convert over the system. Any other ideas there, David? Or does that sound pretty much seem a concise way of approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, the first chapter, I have to say the chapters in this book are incredibly long, 50, 60 pages, and you just think, is there actually going to be a chapter break at some point? But there's a really extended discussion of what is the nature of an evil act and how do you differentiate an evil act from an immoral act. And one of the suggestions that's made is that this is a discussion you have with the players beforehand, because you don't want to necessarily get partway into a chronicle and suggest, well, you did that as an evil act. No, it's not evil. It was entirely pragmatic, because there is a major distinction between just doing something that causes a drop in humanity, but you had no other choice, and doing something where you could have taken another action and you chose not to.
That's a bit like dealing with players when you play Star Wars roleplay games, and the Jedi player uses the dark side, but for good reasons. And so there's never a good reason for using the dark. You're calling on dark power. You had another choice, and you chose to call upon it. If anything, that's more of a reason to go down the dark side. Is that you had a choice not to use it, and you used it. So I think you're right with the difference between an immoral choice because you're backed into a corner and you have to harm someone or do whatever that leads to possibly a better outcome and a greater outcome and something that is good in the long term, but you had no choice in the moment, versus, as you said, like you just do it for the shits and giggles because you enjoy being horrible.
I mean, to a certain extent, it's completely in keeping with Inferno to have a character who believes wholeheartedly that they're doing these things for the greater good. You know, the whole notion that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, that, of course, you're going to make a pact with a demon, but you are aware that it's going to try and trick you. And the pact is about stopping something awful from happening. But as long as the player is willing or at least aware that whatever the motivation, it's taken them down a certain path that the storyteller can then follow up with regards to, there's a potential, as we'll get onto, for possession. So if someone sins, then they make themselves more open to possession, that the character might become cursed, or the demon, in terms of the way in which pacts are constructed. Demons are essentially like the best lawyers in town, and an occultist who knows how to summon and make a deal with a demon does not necessarily understand the nature of subclauses, the exact phrasing thereof, and may think they're making a pact where they have the upper hand, but actually there is room for maneuver that the demon may turn it against them. So yeah, it would be, yes, as a Jedi, you can use the dark side for what you think is good, but at the same time, you've let the dark side into you, and your character's going to start changing as a consequence.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually at the core of Unhallowed Metropolis, is exactly making those kind of choices. Okay, so where shall we start? So I think the first chapter of this book is just a huge discussion about the nature of where demons come from and what they are to a certain extent, and how in this modern age, why perhaps evil is, why evil is one of these things where we in this age we do have a choice not to engage. We should have a choice not to engage in evil acts, and yet people still do. And it's those acts which empower or create, demon spawn of some form, which then comes to plague the world.
It also hammers home that demons themselves are not necessarily very interesting. That demons are interesting when they intersect with humans and human motivations. And so it's the idea of being aware that any use of the infernal will be far richer if you can link that into the motivations of the characters. The demons find weaknesses and prey upon them, as opposed to necessarily making fantastic antagonists. I don't really agree with that.
I think they would be very they'd be very bland antagonists as they are, because I mean it's just a mustache twirling, obviously horrible thing with supernatural powers. It's far more interesting to see how, and we'll talk about this with regards to our movie inspirations, how the demon, the more dangerous demon is really the one that is the shadowy manipulator, which turns regular people against you, and you're unaware or unable to see the pattern in who and how it's corrupting the world around you until it's too late. By which point, yeah, sure, bring out the fully manifested demon from the Hellmouth that has big horns and a mouth full of ravenous teeth. But that's that's the payoff at the end of a chronicle or a story where the characters are being plagued and hampered, and even themselves haunted by a demonic entity.
Absolutely. Should we go over the different classes or types of demons?
Yeah, I mean, so
we'll do it quite briefly, I guess.
I'll just finish off. So the first chapter basically goes through the different histories. So it has mentions of whether they're dark gods or evil spirits. So it gets kind of to the root, about how the ancient gods of the Celts were renamed as being demons. I mean, Sononus was the horned god. Oh, he's now a demon. So you've got that kind of question. There's a talk about Buddhism and how that relates to the poisoning of the mind, because Buddhism doesn't really has a very different approach to things than Christianity, and of course it gets to the idea of where evil comes from, and it relates to Zoroastrianism and the origin of duality, and whether evil is an innate part of the universe or is something that has corrupted the universe and is an external thing. So it's all about defining, what is evil, where does this evil come from? And you don't really need to answer that question. It's just good things to think about, because Chronicles of Darkness runs off mystery and no firm answers, I think is the best way to put it. And there's a little bit of discussion about how demons interact with other supernatural creatures in the world. Was there anything there you found quite interesting?
With regards to, I can just touch on it because I know we don't want to go too far down that route. But yeah, so with relation to vampires, the chronicle that I just wrapped up recently, where I was playing a character who's in the Order of Dracul and who's engaging with Belial's brood. There were lots and lots of elements that were brought to the fore. Vampires, I think what's quite interesting is vampires are very much driven by not necessarily the sin, but they are inherently selfish in the way that demons are inherently selfish, and that there is some overlap between them. So in the campaign I was playing in, it was based around the idea of l'enfant diabolique, so someone who was in the distant past actually related to Lucifer or Satan and to hell, and that at their coming of age they get to choose whether or not to take the path of light or path of darkness, so very much like Night Watch in that respect. And rereading and going into more detail for this for this episode, I noticed so many things that were in the Chronicle that I hadn't necessarily linked to the mythology. So the idea that you can make a gateway into hell, but only through extreme acts of degradation and desecration. So the finale of the Chronicle took place in a defiled church that Belial's brood had taken over, and they'd hung 7 different people who represented the 7 deadly sins, and that was a way of opening the gateway to hell. And what's quite ominous for my character, because we might carry on with a new Chronicle with the same characters, my character chose to walk into hell. He was someone who was driven by desire for knowledge, and reading about how, generally speaking, the hell is greedy. It takes things in and is very reluctant to let them back out again.
I've personally used a demon in Vampire the Requiem, so that was in the second kind of season of the Chronicle. So it was, I think the characters, they uncovered a Mithraeum in Manchester.
Okay.
And so I think one of the characters, basically, he thought he knew what he was doing, but didn't. And so got a whisperer that was pushing him to do things. And that's a big part, is like, you know, and this is a big part with the Circle of the Crone and the way they approach spirits in general, is I think vampires are best played, like, don't play them as always acting like they know how to summon spirits all the time. They don't. The cult, the Circle of the Crone is like a recurrent kind of like cult that's cobbled together by vampires over various ages, and they create some mythology. So they don't really know what they're doing, and they might get lucky and work out a few rituals that work all the time. But you know, I like that kind of like that, trying to take that confidence in a player and screwing with them with this demon. And eventually, I think it was in a final conflict against the cult of Mithras, who is a vampiric order, which I have as kind of like a dark reflection of the Lancashire Sanctum. I think he burnt like a Lancashire Sanctum church down, and that was the final element that allowed this whisperer to become a full demon. So yeah, you can use, in Vampire, I think there's a lot of places you can use it. And of course, when you tie that in with the Strix, you've got a lot of confusion that could happen, because the Strix can possess people, and so can demons. So you never know what you could be dealing with. So that's a good way of injecting some mystery back in when the players are thinking, oh, it's the Strix again. No, it isn't. It's something else.
Absolutely.
So that's good fun. Obviously, Werewolf, lots of stuff there to do with the male djinn and to do with wounds in the world. Then you've also got with Mage, you've got the whole stuff to do with the Akamoth and the creatures of the Abyss. So that's Abyssal Intruders. So that's a good book to look at. Is Intruders. I think that's the one that was called from first edition. And again, you can muck around with mages about what they know and what they don't know, because again, demons are very similar to the Gotia as well, which are demons of the internal personal soul, which they make real.
So they can extract a vice from themselves, yes, and externalize it.
Yeah. So you've got all of that, and then you get into everything else, like, demons. How do demons relate to the Fae? Because the Fae are kind of quite demonic and weird. And then you've also got the Quishilim, which you could say are definitely not the Inferno, but can do cause horrible things to happen when they create chaos. So there's a lot in there. And I think the bit this all leads up to is there's a lot of discussion about how you create your demonic hierarchy, or at least you begin to define what your demon antagonist is in some way. Is it a member of a hierarchy? What is its mythology? Does it have secret names? Is it waiting to be given a secret name, which is important when we talk about whisperers? Does it have a testament, which is essentially, does it have a magical sigil which represents it, and titles that are important when you want to summon it?
Is the testament also a kind of the history or mythology of that particular demon?
No,
I thought it was a combination of the two.
It's a testament intertwines, is a lengthy description of the demon, and its titles, the sigils used to summon it, and its ability. So it's kind of like it's a really full description of what a demon is, which could also be a thought if you think about it, because a demon's true name, even though when you write it down, you may call it, Azazel. The actual name is more of a thought, which once you've written it down it's almost like a mimetic virus. You finally know what this demon's true name is, and it's an image of a land of rotting carcasses, and above you is a sky of purple, of purple clouds filled with unseen stars and the screams of a billion souls. That is the name of a demon. But once you write it down as a name, you give it a name that you feel represents that thought form. But then when someone else reads that name, it almost as if the thought that you had is passed on to them. So there's an interesting thing where these names, these secret names, can be written down, passed on, and then a person can actually then redefine what the true name of a demon is by redefining what that thought form is in a word form. So, for example, the demons can have previous names of like Asmodai or Belphegor, they give as examples, but it changes from occultist to occultist as they write more about this demon and they define more aspects of it, which of course are all terrible things to do, because as you define a demon, as you give it titles and give it more names and all these other things, you're actually giving it more power. So that's all good fun. Was there anything else there that stuck out for you, David, with the whole thing to do with tomes and testaments and the background of your demons?
Cults, I think,
okay,
are particularly interesting. So, again, if we say that demons themselves don't necessarily make the best antagonists, a cult that has its own purpose, its own end game, that worships or has made a deal with a demon, that they are involved in writing its testament, that they are giving it greater and greater power, I think is a really nice way of removing a sense in which the demons could be very abstract. So it could all, in a Call of Cthulhu sense, library use and research and find the details out. Whereas if you've got a living cult, maybe a more current one that you have to interact with in order to gain any knowledge of the demon, I think that again would make it far richer in terms of source material for a chronicle.
I would also be careful with using a demon and how you represent how a demon may bestow blessings and powers onto its followers, because I would be very aware that I would be kind of keen to make the type of things that an infernal demon, a demon of the Inferno would give its followers, if it does give its followers any form of blessing or powers, be a lot more insidious in nature, as a not so obvious power, which relate to the vices. Because I don't know if you've ever read Second Sight from first edition New Order Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness. So that covers how to play. It's got various rules for fallen magic users, so magic that isn't mages. So it can be considered hedge wizardry. And it also has like rules for psionics and psychics and mediums and all those other things which don't really fit a particular single splat, because you're human except for this one very specific power.
Okay.
But at the back of that, it has rules for cults of creatures, of eldritch entities. And they are eldritch entities that do give their cults, very Lovecraftian kind of features. So like the very bloated old man that runs this cult, when you finally face him, he rips open his shirt, and actually his belly is a slathering maw ready to gobble someone up. That kind of weird mutation. So I would keep that kind of stuff for the really crazy kind of eldritch Lovecraftian entities of the outer dark, and abyssal entities, or even maybe kind of mostly fits kind of some of the weirdness of the God Machine, where you get that kind of weird, the evil of the weird evil paranormal stuff that happens at the very edge of science, where science becomes magic and magic becomes science.
Something quite alien about all of those examples, and look, it's very much about kind of an alien mythos. Whereas
I think Inferno needs to be much more human and personal.
Yeah. So, for instance, things like great skill at manipulating the stock market, longevity, various things that would allow a character to be seen in public, interact with people in a way that someone with a gigantic maw for a stomach would struggle.
I would also maybe say, if you've got a character that has like the second sight ability, or like a mage who clearly can detect magic, or maybe say even a changeling that is at the very limit of their clarity, so they can more perceive the magic in the world, is that maybe those are the types of characters that are more likely, out of the corner of their eye, can see the corruption of a person. So features of them do look demonic, but for that split second, that's how I would do it. It's got to be a lot more undercover.
So if we think to the Devil's Advocate, there's that one scene, that one image of the women who are actually demons in human form, and when you see for a second their faces, and then they snap back to looking exactly as they did before. I think that that's actually far more powerful and disturbing than if they were walking around like that constantly.
Yeah. Okay, so what else have we got about cults? There's some discussion about how you construct their beliefs, which I guess is interesting, given that that kind of fits with the idea that some entities would attach themselves to modern mythos, that's created, which again kind of goes back to kind of the Lovecraftian thing, I guess, because Lovecraft is kind of a modern mythos. So that's kind of fun there.
For a modern secret society that links to one of the seven sins, a demon can attach itself to. And it also talks about having pre-existing cults that are demon that have nothing to do with demons. There might be a secret society, and then the demon, as a whisperer, starts influencing and corrupting them and turning them into a cult for its benefit.
And that then leads into the fact that sometimes some of these cults may be, in fact, cults that are nurtured and cultivated by some supernatural creature, like a vampire, and those are obviously ripe for a demon, in the form of a whisperer, again to move in and set up shop as the puppet master of the. In the case of a vampire, a definitely self-assured creature that thinks it's on top, but actually is not. So that's all good fun.
So essentially, we'll get onto this, I guess, but the Whisperer wants to feed on the indulgence of sin, and the more it can influence that, the greater the power it can derive from it. So a Whisperer doesn't actually necessarily care if anyone is aware of what it's doing. The vampire might think that it's just their beast speaking to them, or that these are ideas that it's come to, as opposed to another force is making a deal with it or manipulating it in some way.
Definitely, and given the way certain supernatural races have also the ability for, like, kind of psychic projection of thoughts, because the Invictus obviously have elders that are quite able to manipulate their underlings from a distance. Again, that's an open season for a Whisperer to kind of move in and play the role of the I'm the master telling you things to do, when actually it isn't, and the poor vampire thinks he's acting on behalf of his lord, and is in fact helping this Whisperer become more of a more powerful demon.
I was thinking as well, with to go back to Beast the Primordial for a second, that the complete conviction that what they're doing is right, and that there's nothing morally compromising about it or compromised, would actually potentially make them very open to Whisperers feeding from them. So a lot of what they do is very much tends to be quite spiteful, or maybe based on envy, or even the notion of pride, the idea that a beast can't be wrong. What could be more prideful?
Yeah, I know. Then that gets a bit difficult, because the problem there with Beast is that mortal soul's been gobbled up. So then you've got the question of, can a soul that's no longer mortal, because can a person that is actually now just a vessel for an inhuman spiritual entity, which is the Beast, which is that nightmare entity that lives in the this other realm. Is any act of theirs actually in any way enable an act of sin, because they're not human anymore, and clearly demons feed off the sins of things which are human, or to an extent still human. And when I say that, still have an element of a human soul. So I feel quite confident that a Whisperer can feed off the sin, feed off the lust, greed, wrath, whatever, of a vampire.
Yeah,
because vampires are just a soul that's bent out of shape, and it's got and part of it has either been eaten or been turned into the Beast. It's been poisoned essentially. A mage, definitely. They may think they're enlightened, but they're prone to hubris. So imagine if that's how that manifests in sin. Well, God help them. A werewolf, well, they're a conjoined weird human spirit werewolf soul thing combined together, but I would say they can give birth to humans, so they're still innately human in some way, I would feel.
Yeah, and there are demons that can take possession of spirits, so even the spirit aspect of them is not necessarily free from being open to being taken over by.
A brief aside there, in Werewolf, it always makes the point that in the Hissel, you never see spirits of humans.
Yes.
Okay. So surely then, is the Inferno the actual place? Are the demons of the Inferno? Are they actually the spirits created of human souls, of humans? So we get fractured into all these different spiritual reflections that represent all our vices.
That's a really nihilistic take you could use if you want to go down a Thomas Ligotti route.
Well, if you go with the classic duality of the soul that you get from Eastern philosophies of the Hung and Po, the upper and lower soul, the animalistic soul, and the more the thoughtful soul, then that means the lower animalistic soul is demon, is the bit that goes off and becomes a demon, and that has some merit in what Kindred of the East is all about, if you ever go for classic World of Darkness. But anyway, so then the question is, where does the higher part go to? Does that go to the supernal realms, or does it go to heaven, or does it go to the where the Quashilum come from. The what's it called? The Quashilum come from a realm, the Principle. The other thing is, let's think.
Is there a heaven?
Well, we don't know.
Darkness.
No, we don't know.
Even from reading the book, there's still very, very hazy. There's definitely an Inferno, but there's no.
There's the supernal realms, and then there's also the Principle, which is a place where Pyros comes from, and is the above the supernal. If we think about it,
they're quite alien in comparison to conceptualizations of heaven.
Yes.
So yeah, if there is somewhere else that would be, if it's the reversal of hell, and it's where the virtues of humanity go, then you would still have a very clearly identifiable human aspect to it.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, what else was I going to say? So Geists are still human. They have a human soul, so they're definitely up for committing sin. Changelings are still up for committing sin. Just their soul is, got torn to shreds and then put back together. Prometheans, I'm going to go yes, because they're a proto-human soul.
Yes, so the idea is that, they're a kind of maybe a human soul in the making, and the pilgrimage is refining themselves to the point where they can become human.
Yeah. Mummy, again, I would say yes, because I think the soul of one of the Risen is actually very similar to the soul of one of the Promethean, because both entities are created creatures, patchwork from other beings in some respects, and their souls have been, in one respect, a mummy is trying to remember what it was, and a Promethean is trying to grow it. So there's some similarity between the two lines there, which would be interesting to explore.
I think, with Mummy, I can imagine, again, thinking back to Planescape Torment, but perhaps if as your memory returns, you realise all the awful sins you've committed.
Exactly. You're then open. Yeah.
And your character.
And Demon, well, let's be honest, I don't think one of the... maybe, I don't know, that could be an interesting one. One of the demons in Demon the Descent, would they be capable of sinning? I guess if they're around long enough and begin to act more and more like they're a human.
Then it becomes a matter of, is it the human soul that's necessary, or is it the sin? So the intentional decision to commit an immoral act.
I would say with a demon, possibly they could, because remember they if they've taken other covers, which are again a patchwork, kind of like patchwork souls that kind of mask their demonic nature underneath.
And they can do a pact as well, where they basically consume the human. I think that's probably quite an interesting grey area to explore.
Yeah. Okay. Demons have a few abilities, don't they?
They do.
They have some nice universal abilities. They have an aura of corruption. So that's pretty much what it is. It means you can also, you've got an ability of kind of detecting their presence. And they have the ability to speak all languages. So again, like the demons in Demon the Descent. They have a soul of sin, which means they understand their vice perfectly, and they have a malpraxis, which is related to their vices. They can basically tell perfect lies, which is fine. There's nothing special there. They can just tell perfect lies, which is good for them. It doesn't mean they have to lie all the time. It just means they use that ability to their advantage. And
also the case with demons in Demon the Descent, that you can never tell if they're lying. No supernatural power will allow you to detect.
And Keeper of Secrets means you can't tell if they're lying or not. So those are all fun traits. So again, it's interesting how Demons of the Inferno and Demons of Demon the Descent are similar. And then, of course, they've got a few traits, like they don't have a virtual vice, they have a malpraxis, which is tied to a vice. So malpraxis has a few keys. So it's kind of like you choose a vice of one of the 7 sins, and then you choose a key which can be something elemental in nature, situational, institutional, victims, or subjects. So the example they give is the malpraxis of wrath in the night. So this demon is about violence in the dark of nighttime. Or, for example, there's another one which is the malpraxis of sloth and labor, which means it's about the sin of sloth, to the point, though, that it means its victims end up penniless and losing their jobs. And so the malpraxis is the thing which a demon is essentially cultivating to become more powerful, because they will gain slowly dots in their vices and other keys to have more abilities. But there is at least one vice and one key which they initially kind of start off with. So that's all good fun. I like the idea of, like, again, combining vice with key. That kind of feels a bit like Geist the Sin Eaters, where you're combining a particular manifestation with a particular key.
I think it also makes it much more amenable, open to integrating into a chronicle.
Yeah.
If you just had, this demon feeds on pride or wrath, then you could say every time there's combat, the demon is feeding on it. By giving the key, I think is actually the way of locking it in and giving the demon a sense of an individuality, because that's something that the book is quite keen to convey, that although there are certain types of demons, you don't want to give the sense that there are millions of demons all around and you just happen to come to the attention of one. You want to give it a sense of an identity, of something that you have to engage with, that's not just a kind of minor splat, but it has its own set of objectives. So although the malapraxis is quite simplistic in that respect, but the idea of how about sloth in relation to lovers, how would you manifest that? And you have to think through the ways in which you could come up with scenarios that would allow that to play out in ways that would be meaningful in terms of narrative.
Let's see, what else we got? We've got the ways that demons can then use influence. So much like spirits, they have a measure of influence, and that can be that represents something which they have the ability to manipulate and reach out to while not having to rely on noumena. And again, you've got, depending upon how a demon reaches out, that kind of gives it a classification. So if it's elemental in nature, you've got the Amundi. If it reaches out and manipulates things that are more conceptual in nature, they're deceptors. And if they reach out and manipulate things that are more historical in nature, they're called larvals. But that really means you're relating whether a demon is possessing a place or an object, so it's elemental in nature, or it's possessing a spirit of some form, which makes it a deceptor, or if it's possessing a ghost. So demons can possess ghosts and fuse with them, and they're called larvals. And I really like that, yeah.
Yeah, the idea that someone who's made a pact with a demon, one of the ways in which you can collect its side of the bargain is when the person dies, their ghost becomes the larval, and that's the way the demon takes form.
And this is really good because that's where you can look into how you can use those in a Mortals game. So if you really want to add some mystery to the game and never give any good firm answers on what's going on, and add some extra new things. So say you're playing a group that are, your typical ghost facers, ghost busters, ghost adventurers, or whatever, whichever TV series you've been watching of reality ghost hunting. And there are many. maybe it's most haunted. Yeah, so say you were playing a vet fielding, you're running through a a haunted house. You don't know what type of. You think it's a ghost. You're doing, is anybody there? And you hear this knocking, and it's tapping at the wall. Well, is it a ghost, or it could be, or is it Derek Acora, or is it, or is it actually, again, a spiritual entity that's possessed by a demon, or is it a demonic spirit, or something else? There's a lot of ways you can use this to really add a lot of mystery into games. So there are no easy boxes that you can do in a game that can really make playing a Mortals game of paranormal investigators really quite fun and harrowing, and you think you know what the answer is at the end, but you're really never going to know because you don't know what your storyteller's actually using that particular game. Okay, so the rules for influencing the material world, this is where we start saying you can mostly replace all this with what's in mage or werewolf, and the same with the Numina. I think most of these you could convert straight over looking at them. I think there isn't too much there. You might want to rebalance things, but again, these are going to be NPCs, so just be aware that something might be a little bit more powerful than you expect because of the ways the rules have changed. It might reference traits that don't exist anymore, for example. That's always a bad thing when you go from one edition to another. But in the most part, I think all these Numina for demons are applicable.
In terms of possession, is there an equivalent?
There are firm rules on how spirits can possess. So I would look towards how the Ridden are created in Werewolf Second Edition, and go from there and start and add in and look at how Inferno talks about it, and add in the extra elements that make it easier for a demon of the Inferno to possess someone. So obviously it's going to be a person that is tied to a particular sin, and doing evil acts make someone more eligible for possession in a very different way to how a spirit of the Hissel is going to find someone easy to possess. Which really leads us to, and of course the other powers have got vestments and other things, but it really leads us to, I think, the main thing, which is Whisperers. So, David, do you want to tell us about Whisperers?
Okay, yeah. So Whisperers are essentially tied to a particular individual. The section on them describes them as the weakest demons. So they've got very, very limited influence on the world around them. But what they can do is influence an individual to act in certain ways that feed them. So a whisperer is essentially, if you can imagine, the image of the devil sat upon the shoulder, suggesting taking the worst course of action or the most selfish course of action. And what they are attempting to do with this overall is to gain an infernal rank. And they are described, I believe, as desperately seeking a secret name. They don't have them in the way that demons of high infernal rank have. And so there are, I think, 3 ways in which they can transcend or gain an infernal rank. And if I just bring it up here. So the most straightforward way for a whisperer to evolve is to drive its victim to sin. Every evil act also increases its resistance to exorcism. So interestingly, we'll talk about the possessed later, but the whisperers can be considered to be a form of, would you agree, Chris? It's more of a sense of someone being haunted by something than possessed.
Yes, definitely.
So the more evil the host, as they're described, or you could say that anger, maybe to use a more ghostly terminology, then basically it becomes eventually a rank 1 dominion which is a demon in its own right. It can also have what's called occult exaltation. If its victim is an occultist, the Whisperer can urge her to name, define, and empower it. Demonologists are split between the idea that the host creates a metaphysical image for the demon to inhabit. This is going back to what we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And the belief that the Whisperer merely teaches hell's secrets. So whether or not the name is entirely created by the occultist, or whether the Whisperer tells them the name or suggests a name that then takes on power. Basically, this, in mechanical terms, results to a role in creating an infernal testament. And in terms of successes, we've got at the lowest level, just makes it easier to do in future, but 15 plus successes basically allows you to take on 2 infernal ranks, 2 numenors, and 1 new malapraxis. So they can gain in power that way. But all of these things are through the actions of others. So they're very much limited to the weakness or susceptibility of the human to furthering their own goals. They don't really have an enormous degree of power. And I think the third one, which leads us on to Diaboli, basically diabolical union. They can latch onto a supernatural being. They have the knowledge to transform a Whisperer into a powerful dominion, but some of them can summon spirits with which the Whisperer is capable of merging. So the spirit, the Whisperer can merge with the spirit in order to become a Diaboli, which is, I'll hand over the baton to you now, Chris, but they're the ghosts that have become possessed by the demonic.
So Diaboli are they're ghosts and spirits and ghosts that carry been taken over by the demons. In some respects, then they're kind of similar to the Magath of Werewolf, where you've had 2 spirits fused together, 2 very different spirits that fuse together, creating some alien kind of creature. And in that respect, also kind of similar to Geists, even, because Geists are part ghost, and they've also partly redefined themselves to kind of like a spirit of death. That's also a ghost. The thing I was going to say about Whisperers, the interesting thing about Whisperers is that they're not always new things wanting to become demons. There's a lot of discussion that because greater demons, as if they're like Lord of Change or a Cornate whatever, bloodthirsty, yeah, but more powerful demons that exist in hell or are in danger of being banished to hell can drop back to being a Whisperer for their own safety, so it's more easy to conceal themselves, and it's also again another route through it to increase their power. So you can have demons reach out across the threshold as a Whisperer to then allow them a gateway into our world and to increase their own power.
And sometimes pretend that they're Whisperers when they actually have far more power, so that the occultist who thinks they know what they're dealing with and that they're in control will get a very nasty surprise further down
or
the
even
line.
a Whisperer of a lesser demon can be sent out to help guide an occultist summon its Lord Demon Master, which could be an even greater demon. So there's a lot of fun things with that. And of course, Whisperers can do things like have numerous abilities to deceive the person they're attached to and create false memories and shape the world around them, so they actually so they shoot someone when they actually think it's, say, an intruder in their home. So
and they can influence dreams as well, but it's all very subtle. You're not allowed to show to change the dream to be something that the individual would not have thought of themselves. You can just shift it slightly, shift the emphasis.
Yes. So, as we said, the Diaboli are a fusion of demon with ghost or with spirit. And I guess that where that makes things interesting, it gives you kind of an interesting mixture of abilities and themes that you can use. So again, it's like you think it's a ghost of an old ancestor or something, but it's actually under the mask, it's this creature of sin. But of course, not all spiritual entities will become diaboli, because obviously ghosts. Not all ghosts are actually horrible, selfish creatures. Not all spirits are causing terror and trauma and destruction in the world. So not all of these are good candidates for creating diaboli. I guess perhaps Gautier then in the astral realm, and also other thought forms that are evil thoughts that exist in the dream world, in the dream worlds, are good candidates for demonic possession, which then gets kind of weird. I guess you could go to some strange places where you take the idea of a nightmare of some form, and it is the nightmare itself that has a form in the dream world that gets possessed by a demon and comes into our world. So that could be a Freddy Krueger in some respects. They
could get very abstract as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty with these. And they explain that good potential for, if you want some ideas for evil ghosts, there's the Dybuks and the Gaki. So Gaki are Japanese, Dybuks are Hebrew ghosts, and that relates to the film The Possession, which is about the Dybuk box. We actually watched the the spin-off series from Ghost Adventures is Deadly Possessions, where they actually had the Dybuk box on the show, which was interesting.
I can imagine.
And you've also got other spiritual entities you could think of is tulpas, which are from Buddhism. So again, tulpas are creatures created by thought. And that gets us finally to the different types. So we've got deceptors, which are demons created of concepts from the astral realm, sinful thoughts, basically, or nightmares that are possessed by demons. The Amundi, which are our shadow spirits, our spirits of the Hissel. So that could be the example is an amundus of a toxic waste dump.
Oh, I did quite like that. Yeah, that example. So it wasn't just I think, do they come back to this later? The idea that it's not just a toxic waste dump you wouldn't necessarily think is a sin. It's a corruption of the natural world. But they talk about the greed of the person.
Yeah, that led to the action. Yeah,
yeah, because dumping the waste meant they could make a bigger profit.
And as we said, we've got larvals, which we've already said with the Dybuks and Gaki.
I think the three, the larvals, are the most interesting to me.
They're one of the immediately most useful. But I mean, depending upon your game, all of those are incredibly useful for, again, adding that extra bit of mystery into your game. You think in Geist you're dealing with an evil, just a ghost that's lashing out because it's one of the restless dead, and then actually, it's something far more sinister that you're facing. So, in most terms, I think they describe the fact that you're just using the same rules for ghosts and spirits, but you've got the additional abilities of demons on top. And they can, of course, evolve and they can transform themselves. So the examples are that they can fetter themselves to a location. So that becomes a malus loci, which is... So that makes sense because, ghosts have anchors to the world, which is a place. It could be a person or an object. For example, an object's a good one, like the classic haunted objects like Robert the Doll. Or they can fall back to being a whisper, which is good. So they can then evolve and change themselves again. So, just about, when they're about to be destroyed, they've done what they wanted to do as a larval. They could fall back to being a whisper and then evolve into something different, which is annoying.
Annoying, but also I think that's one of the most compelling story elements, to have something that's shifting and it's hard to actually pin down, and keeps recurring in different forms. I think it's potentially could irritate your players. It might be quite difficult to balance, but I think if you got it right, that could be a very compelling way of linking a chronicle together.
And then we've also got they can transcend, as we said before, through sin, or they can get an occult exaltation. And what we get to next then is dominions, which are apparently true demons. So, David, do you want to tell us about dominions?
Well, I have to say, reading this section, it kind of feels as though there's a tacit acknowledgement that dominions of the three that you can interact with are perhaps the least interesting, and that with regards to how they interact with the players, yes, you can see them in their true demonic, I think, hell form, but quite often they do interact through taking on the form of whisperers. Whether that's actually becoming whisperers or pretending to be. I think the one section that I thought was particularly memorable is this idea that they want to get out of hell. The idea that hell is horrible even for demons. So there's a line here: even demons hate hell. The realms above are where real power lies. Hell is already corrupt. Dominions can't thrive there any more than a mortal could if he's forced to eat his own shit to survive. So there's it's a kind of reminds me of sort of Trent Reznor lyric, but kind of a scatological imagery there. But this may be the way to make dominions interesting if they had a motivation that wasn't just, I want to be evil, but maybe they're being tortured in hell by something more powerful and they want to get out. So they either take on the form of a whisperer or send a whisperer out, convince an occultist to summon them in order to escape hell. Is there a possibility there of an NPC that isn't just entirely negative?
I don't think so, to be honest. No, I mean, it's interesting to think about the demons want to escape hell, but I would say that the reason, like, if hell is, fueled by the essence that comes from sin, just as spirits and the Hyssal is the essence of just the primal wild, then the way I would think about it is hell is possibly where sin goes to once it's been processed, regurgitated, eaten again, and shat out. It's got the taste of it, but it has no nourishment.
So it's more of a sense of wanting more refined food.
Yeah, and you could think about that in the sense that it represents the difference of what the realm of the Inferno is to the fallen world, in the same way that the supernal realm of Pandemonium is like. So people that aren't aware of Mage Awakening, there are 5 supernal realms from which magic comes down into our reality, that's drawn down through the watchtowers, through symbology. One of these is related to the Mastigos mages, who face demons. These are demons in a very different sense. These are demons that hold you back from your potential. The whole point is that these are demons that test you. The demons are not about evil or good. They're about trial and tribulation and sacrifice. Therefore, it's considered that if the realm of the Fey realm of Arcadia is the fallen reflection of the supernal realm of Arcadia, then the same could possibly be said about the Inferno to Pandemonium, much as the underworld is then the fallen reflection of Stygia, which is a supernal realm of death and matter. So there are links to Mage. You could say that reality emanates from the supernal realms, is made real in our world, empowers it, creates things, creates more things, because our realm also creates enough magic in essence to power the eldritch entity known as the God Machine. But after all of that, all that stuff filters down to these other realms and is the remnants of it. It has some of the taste, some of the flavor, but it's just not as succulent as coming up here and taking it for yourself. Which is why, the Fae themselves come into our realm to steal away people to take to Arcadia, and why ghosts are hungry to come back to our world, and obviously require people to remember them, and possibly why demons want to come up and take stuff, sin in its purest form. How that obviously relates to the duat and mummy, I guess, is also reflected in that energy emanates from our world into relics, which are taken into the duat by mummies. So it makes a bit of sense. I think it makes sense why demons want to come up and play with us.
Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe in that sense, could you have a demon, a dominion, that is maybe a sort of tortured soul that wants to escape? Could you use these rules?
I don't see why not, because obviously you can create gateways to hell. Someone could be dragged into hell by whatever infernal act they've done. They could be the ghost. When the larvals, maybe in that very last moment, because by being possessed, so much essence is now in the ghostly form that the larval now also has more sentience again. So it's not just a ghostly repeater in that sense. Just doing a few actions because of what memories have in the world have held strong. It's actually back to its full sense of a person. It just has no control. It's the backseat passenger to this insane driver that's living on and feasting on gluttony. And in that action of being, say, sent to hell, finally the demon sent to hell, the ghost, and thus maybe the soul, is taken all the way to hell. And in that place, that ghost is then tortured and in turn turned into a demon.
So you could then have, that's something that's maybe escaped hell and a chronicle, not necessarily for a player character, but you could have players assisting something from trying to avoid being dragged back.
Well, yeah, that would be interesting if there is things that are eager to drag demons back. That would be an interesting thing. That gets us to the question: is there some sort of Satan, Lucifer, gatekeeper, torturer, jailer kind of concept?
They do hint at that. I mean, one thing maybe in terms of the way in which you could interact with them in the world is slightly limited, but they do talk about there being hierarchies within hell. There's a table that builds up to, you have lesser demons, greater demons, archdemons, dukes of hell, and at the top you've got the adversary. So yeah, I think you could totally, and I think this would make demons far more interesting, of having that idea of maybe a demon. If demons are supposedly rebel angels, is it inconceivable that a demon might rebel against the hierarchy of hell?
Yeah, I mean, it gives you at least some sort of plot hook for playing a game where you are one of the possessed and playing one of the possessed in a story, because you'd be eager to obviously revel in sin, but at the same time you don't want to sin too hard that you light up like a freaking lighthouse and they come to cart you off back to hell. And I guess there's this is where possibly the crossover happens, and why maybe a good thing to look at for that type of thing is the translation guide for Demon the Descent and Demon the Fallen. So Demon the Fallen is a classic World of Darkness game, which is biblical demons that have been let loose on the world. And you've got a difference between, you've got the demons that want to just remain in the world. You've got the demons that want to obviously take heaven and storm it. and you've got the other ones I think that kind of just generally hate what they are, and just want to forget it all and destroy each other or something. But you've also got other types of demons, like you've got the Earthbound, which are another type of demon that was never locked away in hell. And you also get the whole thing. I think Lucifer in that setting never went to hell. He was the gatekeeper, and he actually fears all the other demons or something like that. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested. I presume maybe at some point we'll get a 20th anniversary of Demon the Fallen.
Yeah, more than likely.
With regards to Dominions, I mean, this is I really do rate Inferno as one of the best World of Darkness books that I've read. But with regards to Dominions, I feel that there's the manifestations of them, and the way they're described doesn't really go much beyond what's already discussed in relation to Whisperers and Diaboli. And I would have liked something a little bit more distinctive. So you've got the Defilers; they poison places or corrupt them. Okay, but what's different about them being a Dominion as opposed to? Do
you know what's interesting is if you look at the list of Defilers, Nemesises, Slayers, Subversives, and Tempters.
Yeah.
They almost read like the same shopping list in Beast the Primordial.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Intriguing. Because, the Slayers, these Dominions kill as often as they can. Sophisticated demons look down upon Slayers because a dead soul isn't a damn soul. I don't know. I feel that maybe this is when you come to the point of having a demon with as little human connection as possible becomes less compelling, less interesting as an antagonist. But I would say that the Dominions are probably the part of the book that I felt was weakest.
Yeah. Okay, because we're not almost at the end of this little gone through the first chapter of interesting things.
That's how long this chapter is.
Yeah, there's a whole load of it kind of ends with like desecrated places and Malus Loci. So this is all about places that are literally locations that get possessed by demons because it become a demonic fetter. These also could relate to things you could use in Mage, Werewolf, and the Auto Dracul call them worms' nests. So just these can be places of power, of spiritual power, of essence, which thus can, as a demon takes hold of it, can use it and pervert it to its own causes. But generally, it's only going to take a place, though, which is itself already has some level of desecration that's occurred there. So we're talking about a worm's nest or a werewolf loci, possibly, that already is a wound in reality. It's already had like murder happen there so much that negative essence bleeds through into the world.
Interestingly, though, it fades over time. So for a place to retain its kind of desecrated or evil essence, more acts have to be carried out there. So I think that then links to the idea of a Diaboli taking on being anchored in a place, but then is encouraging and manipulating whoever enters the place or comes near that place to continue to feed it. Because otherwise, if it's just left for, I think there's a chart somewhere about whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 20 years, 50 years, depending on the level of evil done. Again, that creates a plot device that you would need to find ways in which that could happen.
So carrying on, breather. So that was a massive, massive section. I think this is the thing with this book. Unpacking chapter 1 takes a lot. But once you've done it, you can run with everything and you get tons of ideas. So chapter 2 is simply systems. And we're not going to delve too much on this because it's systems. But essentially it's got some ideas for how you go about summoning demons and how a character goes about it. The reasons for why they do it, generally because either A, the person thinks they can do it and they're awesome and they can summon demons and control it, what a fool. Or B, they're very desperate and it's a last resort and they go to summoning a demon because they need something with power so they can gain control in the world somehow. And then, of course, it rolls on with the fact of how does the character go about researching this, and the fact that they have to, get the attention of a demon. It may not be the demon they're actually hoping to summon. If they've researched a particular demon, they may not have all the facts and summon a very different demon. And then eventually you get to the last bit where they kind of have to negotiate with the demon once it's been summoned about what the demon's going to do, what they're going to give in return, etc., etc., etc. Whether they, what type of sacrifices they have to make, and there's at least a good mechanics of going through it. And I think this all translates to Chronicles of Darkness fairly well. And there's some examples of this. It also gets into the idea of accidental summonings, where you could be following some sort of ritual, or you may accidentally complete some ritual that could have been part completed, and you do the last thing, which is like spilling blood or some other act of vice, which leads to the ritual being completed and this spiritual entity finally breaching into our world.
So in that respect, Hellraiser would be a good example.
Oh yeah, the puzzle box is like, classic accidental summoning, which is solving the puzzle. You wouldn't think something so simple as knowing how to open a box would open the way to hell. Or to it,
apparently.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other things that can lead to summoning is the fact that you could be, by nature, inherently able to summon demons because you're cursed by some means, which, again, is kind of a bit Hellraiser if you consider Hellraiser 3 with, being able to make the puzzle boxes then. And, of course, you've got Whisperers, which help instruct people to do so. But, of course, core of all this is once you've summoned a demon, you're going to have to make a pact with it in order to hopefully control it. And there's a lot of examples here of pacts you can make depending upon the sin that the demon's connected to. And, of course, the thing to keep in mind is a demon is a perfect lawyer and is going to do the least amount of work for the most amount of gain. I don't think there's much more to cover on that because there's a lot of good systems here, which I think, and examples anyway, which can be translated over. The question is really, are you going to use these as plot hooks and story dingus type stuff, or is an actual player character, going to do this? And those are two very different scenarios.
I'd also be tempted to be quite picky in terms of which mechanics you actually use, because I think it goes in the next chapter we're going to cover with regards to possession. So, if it's an integral part of the chronicle that a demon is summoned and a pact is made, potentially just role play it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In the game I was in, my character used someone else's ritual that had been conducted to be able to speak to the demon that they'd summoned. But that was very much done without rolling dice, particularly. It really depends on, are the mechanics helping the story? Are they necessary? I think some of this, yes, and some of it potentially not. I think mainly think about if, for instance, the act of summoning or forming a pact, think about what could happen if they failed the rolls, and is that interesting?
Yeah. You really got to think about how the mechanics really interface with the story and what you're trying to do, and if it's the summoning is an integral part, as you said, of the story itself, not just
something you could do.
Yeah, without really thinking about the impact on the story itself. There's a list of artifacts then later, which is just kind of items which are being touched by demonic, power. they're kind of cool, but like, I mean, they're just things that allow you to do more sin. Really, that's basically it. And then we get on to what I would say is the last main chapter, because everything after that is kind of example demons and example characters, really, and so forth, is the possessed.
Yeah.
So the possessed covers people who, in some way, have invited a demon to possess them. Either they wanted it to happen or they were the perfect host. So you've got examples of the chosen, then you've got the hopeless, the hateful. So these are people that, are powered by a particular sin. The innocent, which is someone that is, so when it says innocent, is a person that is unaware of how evil the world is and so naive that they think demons don't exist and they're the perfect person because they have no real mental will to defend against these alien entities. You've got the mad, and because obviously, because I mean, again, if you're going to go with the mad, let's do a big disclaimer on this, because this is possibly the most overused trope in cinema that involves demons and demon possession. Is, oh look, who's being possessed in this film? Why, it's the young woman who's clearly mad. Like, I think there could be a lot more nuance in there, and I think it could be a much more powerful story about how unfortunate mental health can open you up to the predations of these alien entities, and that the people around them don't realize that the person that's acting out isn't doing it because of the unfortunate health that they are in psychologically. It's because they have been maybe looking to be helped for so long that they became in turn helpless and were thus open to demonic possession. I think that's maybe more powerful than just doing, oh look, it's the crazy girl that's possessed and she's doing the weird, doing the weird poses and so forth. I think that's overused in cinema.
Also, I'm somewhat uncomfortable with this association of madness and evil. The idea that someone who has a mental health condition is somehow more prone to be connected to the demonic than those who aren't. So I did like the suggestion that instead of going down that trope, having someone, for instance, who had schizophrenia, who's been battling demons, trying to tell them to do things that they knew were wrong, so long that the demon, they're unusually resilient towards demons. And I think that could be quite an interesting way of, if you wanted to go down the route of using characters who are conceptualized as mad, that isn't just, as you say, quite tired by now.
Yeah, there's too many tired tropes of that one. The selfish, that makes sense. So really, it's all people that generally are sinners in some way, or because you could consider the innocent to also be prideful in the sense that they believe the world is simpler than it is, and there is no supernatural entities. And really, all we get then is a lot of mechanics behind it. And I think if we quickly look at this, I think again, I don't think there's really any need to do the roles about resisting possession. I don't think that serves any, because if you're going to play a character that's going to be possessed, I think you as a player have already made you've already made the concept of the character as being possessed, and that's what you're looking at exploring, is how this character exists in the world of the world of darkness, in this or whatever your world of darkness is. So I think even though they've given roles for resisting possession, I don't think they shouldn't be always used. They should be used at the right moments in a game. Like if you're playing a vampire that is resisting possession from a demon, sure, do that, because that's not what you want to play. You're playing a vampire character. But if you want to play one of the possessed, then you're asking a very different question about whether you even need to consider rolling to resist. You really don't need to.
It's quite interesting in that sense, though, of if you're playing a character who's possessed, is your character the human who's possessed, or the demon that's doing the possessing, or both?
I think at that point you're possibly playing a character that's more like playing a Sin Eater, where you've got the
two souls in one body.
Yeah, and the question is whether the demon is driving or the person's driving, and maybe they're both driving and enjoying the ride together and the company. And you could then also look at how you could possibly play a game that's almost generational, and I think you could also, in which case you could look at how a particular demon has possessed different people over time. I think Sam's written some stuff like this about a demon that has different hosts. So you could look at that and have each host in a different time period, maybe. So you could look at how sin has evolved over time, and that could be a fun kind of concept to go through. In which case, then you're asking different things of the possessed character in each time frame and of the demon itself.
So the demon is the connecting factor, but each of those characters would have their own take on that.
Yeah,
that character type, and that links to one of the films you suggested we discussed, which is Fallen.
Yeah,
and the idea of a demon in Fallen, the demon can hop between bodies incredibly easily, bewilderingly so. But maybe something that's harder in terms of possession, as opposed to just touch someone and then they're possessed. That would be a nightmare as a storyteller to keep track of. But that idea of maybe having a chronicle about the way in which as you start playing the characters, at a certain point in their life, the demon takes possession of them, and then you follow them along until it makes that leap into the next generation.
So the possessed template, so basically a character is the same as always, and this is where I'm going to suggest some things for Chronicles of Darkness. Possessed template, what's interesting that you would have to do? So you gain dots in each vice. In some respects, again, I think you could gain some ideas from like Werewolf and how renown works, maybe. So that you've got different types of renown. There's 5 types that relates to each of the auspices. So maybe you've got now 7 types of renown, which is actually kind of like your ratings in vices. But I think in general, most of it can be converted over. I think there just has to be some thought put into how you treat, how you deal with morality and integrity. So again, you might want to consider harmony in Werewolf, or perhaps maybe when second edition Geist comes out, maybe take some idea from synergy, and that the higher the synergy is, the better in keeping the two souls are together, less antagonistic, and the lower they're more competing. I know I think you'd have to do a bit of work there to get it to work with the new system. But again, like you could just play first edition World of Darkness, New World of Darkness, and just use everything as is, which is fine. The main powers are vestments, and I think we just get a smorgasbord of different powers, don't we?
Yeah. Yes.
So they're not really any real rankings in stuff. You just get lots of... they have got dots, but you just get lots of different... vestments are classed under innate and lesser and greater. They've got dot ratings and they're attached to a particular sin. So obviously, in that respect, they are very much like gifts in Werewolf. So again, look at Werewolf second edition. That might give you some ideas on how to convert it over. And I think that actually is the most I can say about the systems in this. There's a lot of nice ideas for powers, and you could mostly get some more from Demon the Descent, could mostly give you some ideas for some other example vestments.
And one thing that occurred to me is, in what sort of chronicle could a player play a possessed character? Because it makes sense when you think about an individual character, but how would the other characters interact with that possessed person?
It's difficult. You could play possessed in a. You could possibly play possessed in a game of mage. Be hard. I mean, it would be assuming that the possessed was able to hide their nature from the mages. So that's a hard. Possessed with Promethean, interesting. Possessed with Sin Eaters, bit more difficult possibly. Possessed with Demon the Descent. Yeah, that looks like an interesting, weird fit.
I think vampire, to
yes.
get back to it, I think would be, so say if you had a Belial's Brood group, that you could have someone as either a possessed vampire or even a possessed human who is considered to be exalted because of their demonic connections, their infernal rank.
Well, a possessed human is a nice way of getting the equivalent type of character to a ghoul that has more autonomy, because they can look after a vampire, their vampire coterie during the day, and yet also they've got powers. And if you're a bunch of vampires, you might kind of be a bit squeamish at what this possessed guy does sometimes, but you might turn a blind eye, and the demon may well get off on that. The fact that you turn a blind eye to it doing sin in whatever form. So I think there's
and also with Belial's Brood, because we won't go too far into that because I think that could be its own episode, but because they revere demons, there's a potential to have that kind of ghoul relationship, but without not just dependency, but maybe more of a sense of equals. Mm-hmm. That the vampires might not see the possessed as being beneath them or a servant. They're an ally.
Yeah, and you could mostly do the same thing if you're playing the what are they? The pure tribes in Werewolf. Again, I think they would see one of the possessed as a potential ally, possibly. And the last thing really to say about the possessed, I was going to say, is that's interesting, is that if they tap some of their higher powers too much, that eventually they burn out their body, which I kind of like the feeling of. That's again kind of like Demon the Descent has Going Loud, and burning off one of your covers. Again, Demons of the Inferno could literally wear out the person that they've possessed.
Have you seen Supernatural?
Yeah.
It's well and truly. I think they're on. Is it season 12 now? It did not need to be that long. But one of the in an earlier season, when it was still far more watchable, they had a character play the vessel of Lucifer, but it wasn't the chosen vessel. So he started deteriorating. His skin began to break down, and he looked like he had a kind of degenerative disease. And maybe if you were playing a character and you did use your powers, as you use them more and more, you could maybe have elements of I'm thinking like a David Cronenberg-esque, the body starting to break down, something like The Fly. So I think there's loads of room for some kind of corporeal representations of that spiritual corruption.
Definitely. I think that's where we should leave it with the books. The rest is all kind of, there's a lot of story hooks and everything, and seeds and ideas and how to storytell playing the possessed. But I think we've covered a good amount of that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about films at last.
Yes.
Okay, so we had a good list of films we thought that were relevant to demons in Chronicles of Darkness. Let me see, where's our list? When it pops up, where is it? Why is it not popping up in my...
There's Devil.
Yep.
I avoided watching this film for a while because the post, the entirety of the film took place in the elevator. And although the majority of the film does take place in the elevator, I think it's a far, far, far more interesting film than the trailer suggested. So you initially recommended this to me. So what was it about Devil that you liked?
I think it represents kind of the question of like you've got in a very confined space, a very kind of tight plot, a representation of a demon going about. Or I would say it's a good example of a demon looking for transcendence. If you don't play the Lucifer angle of it, you could look at it as a demon looking for transcendence by going through these particular examples of its sin until it gets to the final, like, ultimate sacrifice, and it's looking for that to be done so it can have its infernal transcendence. And I just kind of that just seemed to resonate quite well with what we have in Inferno. I think that ties together quite well.
Absolutely, it's very much about in preying on people's insecurities in order to push them towards sinning. But until the end of the film, you're not entirely sure how it's doing it or why it's doing it. I think that the moment where you see the demon and the body it's possessing, and you see the demon become angry, overall, I would say it's less of a horror film and more of a thriller.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah,
but I do think there are a couple of moments that are genuinely disturbing, and I think that representation of a kind of sort of controlled malice, and like the control slips for a moment, and you just get this glimpse of hell or the damnation of this thing, and then it brings it back under control. So yeah, maybe Devil would be an example if you're engaging with, say, an archdemon or something very, very powerful, but the way it wants to gain power is not through forcibly possessing someone. It's actually about pushing them to sin further and further to the point where they belong to it.
Yeah, which makes it more of a whisperer in what we've looked at so far, in that sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what I would go look at that film for ideas on that. I don't want to talk about it too much more to give away anything, but I think it's not. I think it's a pretty decent film and it's fairly novel. I think in some respects it has elements similar to what we'll say about Fallen, but I think it's somewhat more engaging than Fallen. I think Fallen has issues it's not the greatest film, but we'll get to that one in a moment. What have we got
also
next?
Reminded me a little bit of John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, okay.
So that kind of paranoia that, who is the demon, and before you realise there's a demon, who is the killer, who is the person that can't be trusted.
You could easily use it as an example of doing a one-shot of a game, and almost kind of like a murder mystery.
Yeah, it very much is it's a murder mystery in an incredibly confined space where you would think it'd be impossible to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Constantine. Okay, so we'll go with the movie version of John Constantine.
Yep.
What stands out about this one? So I would say initially we've got quite a few good examples of demons in various different forms. So you get kind of like the way I can't think of the character's name. Rachel Weisz's character is almost you could say is being played by a whisperer. You've also got the other demons and also kind of angels you can consider examples of the possessed.
I really like the image of hell that they possess.
Yes.
And I think that one of the key elements to using Inferno in a way that is genuinely chilling and engaging, as opposed to a kind of camp hammer horror, is the way in which demons are presented. And there are the artwork for the most part, I would say, is very good in Inferno. But I think that, the cloven hooved horned demon it's going to be very difficult to sell to
Yeah.
players as something that's disturbing. Whereas in Constantine, you've got with essentially what appears to be where the brain would be hollowed out, and there's a kind of, if you can convey a sense of damnation, but also alienation, and kind of suffering. What I would link this to, it's not actually on our list of films, but is the depiction of the demonic in the film of Silent Hill.
Oh yeah, sure.
Which I have to say, huge video game player. I grew up absolutely devoured every game I could come across. The vast majority of video game to film adaptations are atrociously bad. But I would say that Silent Hill is the first that I've seen that really captures the atmosphere of the game it's based on. I enjoyed it far more than I expected to. I think that
I was going to say the problem with Silent Hill, the film, is it's visually good. The problem is the plot is clearly just doing run here, collect this object, run there, collect that object at one point, and it's just like it's kind of just a bit too video gamey. I think they could have done a lot more with it, but
it's a weird one because it depends how you assess it. So in terms of what we want from a conventional narrative film, problems with it, but an attempt to capture the essence of what playing the game was like as a film, I think it balances the kind of plot and game elements quite well. But it's a weird kind of experience, and I don't know whether I don't know what it would be like to watch that film having not played the game.
I think if we're going to talk about if we mention Silent Hill, I would say the better one to think of in relation to Inferno is Silent Hill 2, because that is actually generally all the main player character that you have, and the other characters you meet are all dealing with a particular kind of haunted by a particular sin that they've done, and I think that's a bit more compelling. I think Silent Hill 1 doesn't quite have that because it has the whole thing about this reborn, character, and I think Silent Hill 2's got a plot that's more that lends itself better to Inferno.
I think that Silent Hill 2 is also the best Silent Hill game that's been made, and it will probably never be beaten. I was quite interested in the prospect of Silent Hills, but unfortunately that
I don't know whether that project is may be restarted again. I don't know. We'll see. There's always rumors. Is there anything else to say about Constantine? I mean, visually it's good. I kind of like the way John Constantine's able to like do exorcisms because he's cool.
Yeah, and I actually, Keanu Reeves comes in for a lot of criticism in terms of his range as an actor, but I think that he puts in a really good performance for Constantine. I think that it's probably my favorite film in terms of his performance that I've seen, and there's an element of, I'd say the most Chronicles of Darkness element of the film is that he occupies a very morally ambiguous world. That John Constantine is a character who is at once damned but also has redemptive qualities, and I think that taking away maybe some of the kind of focus on a single character, but I think that's something that you could bring across into a Mortals game perhaps.
I'm also told to make a point that Balthazar is an awesome demon in that film. He's a brilliant bastard, and Papa Midnight is also awesome as a character. I think he's done really well in that film.
And the Perfect Circle song, Passive, which was used for the film, is one of my favourites. So move on to Fallen.
Yeah.
Which you have issues with.
I would say it's just I mean, it's a good idea. I just think. Okay, actually, I'll say what there's good things about Fallen. There's bad things. I think bad things is generally pacing and so forth, and I think they could be a bit more interesting. As you said, like the demons seem to hop around really easily. So in Fallen we have a demon which is able to body hop, and where the police initially thought it's a copycat murderer, copycat serial killer, it's actually this demon doing the same thing in the same city again. It seems like for kicks, really, just to show that it's better than humans and better than these certain police detectives. But I just go on.
Itself is actually exactly what demons are in Inferno. It's a selfish, spiteful, petty, arrogant being that just absolutely revels in sin and wants to drag people down. That kind of is, for all its problems, that is what the demons of Inferno are.
Yeah, I just think the pacing is a bit off. It gets a bit slow in paces.
Yeah, and I think the ability to... I mean, there's a great scene where it's hopping from body to body and he doesn't know where to look. But I think that the ease with which the demon passes from body to body kind of creates a sense of, well, how on earth can you ever stop this? And I think that's where the mechanics for possession would become useful. So if it was attempting to move from NPC to NPC, for instance, because otherwise, if you can just hop with, I think all it requires in that film is a touch.
Yeah.
And when it's outside the body and it's desperate, it can project itself something like a mile in any direction to possess something. So I think that's kind of problematic. Wanting to give any spoilers, the end of the film, whilst I love Rolling Stones' "Sympathy for the Devil," it's Interview with a Vampire had already done it. It just felt a kind of a bit too obvious.
The other thing to say about Fallen is it is because obviously I've only watched it properly recently in the lead up to doing this, and it became so obvious where Supernatural cribbed everything for how it does its demons. It's so obvious. It's just like, oh right, okay, it's that. It's just,
But I think I'm trying to remember the name of the Rolling Stones song. It keeps singing, "Time is on my side." But giving a demon, if you're going to have a character that possesses other characters, give it something that is clearly identifiable. So in Supernatural, one of the things I thought they did really well. Do you remember Alistair, who was the Hell's chief torturer?
Oh yeah.
That he had a lisp, and everyone he possessed took on that lisp. And so having the song that the demon sings, I like that. I think it prevents it from feeling like, if we go back to John Carpenter's The Thing, so something with no real person, just a malevolent spirit. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think having some kind of element that you'd be able to get, oh, okay, so this is the same demon, as opposed to just, I have no idea what's going on.
No, I think a quirk is important. Yeah. Okay. Starry Eyes.
Yes.
Is awesome. Now, I don't know whether it's... Okay, I'm going to start with this. It's a great film. I don't think it's a great story for... Let's say. It's a great prelude if you're going to play a possessed character.
Yes.
So it's good ideas there. It's a great example of an antagonistic cult about to do something to someone, and you slowly... So this could be a background plot in your chronicle that you slowly become aware that there's this poor person being manipulated, harassed, etc., until they're prime for possession. So, and that's when at which point, the background plot becomes the core story in your chronicle at that point. So you can have this going on in the background for a few stories, and then it becomes the main thing. So that's how I would use it. So Starry Eyes, I really don't want to say too much about it, but it is basically a poor woman is eventually driven to the point that she is prime for possession, and then you see that transformation. And well, yeah, I mean, it's a innocent. Yeah, Sam's telling me she's not innocent. She jumps at the chance. So, but it's kind of like they're making her ready to make that jump, and that she's aware that she wants to make that jump. And
very early on, though, because it's quite a heavy-handed metaphor for Hollywood and
the
way in which it turns them into a commodity. But I guess that you've got this really interesting juxtaposition. On the one hand, is it greed or pride that leads her to do it? But on the other hand, just, it's not just this cult, the entirety of the society in which she's operating. Yeah. There's this whole notion that if you don't make it, you've essentially failed as a human being and your life is over. And those kinds of pressures allow a cult like that to operate. So that the cult is its own thing, but it's very much embedded in the whole Hollywood system and society. So I think that's, again, quite a good plot hook. So it's not a case of a system in which people are treated fairly, a meritocracy in which people are remunerated in a way that is fair and equitable. It's an already really problematic system in which a cult can feed on these desires, feed on these anxieties.
Which is then maybe a good story point in doing that, because the question then ultimately is, what is the ultimate evil? Is it these demons? Is it the cult? Or is it just society at large?
Celebrity culture, capitalism. There's all sorts of interesting themes. I guess, I mean, in terms of Chronicles of Darkness, it's very much usually rooted in a combination of politics, factions, and individuals, as opposed to having a kind of the film is very much a critique of that system and that world. I don't know whether if your players realised that was what you were doing, that they would feel that you were leading them through a morality play.
Yeah. Okay. Hellraiser.
The classic.
So okay, I'll go with my impressions of it. So I've watched it a few times recently as well. So
yep.
I think Hellraiser's a good one on here because you really get demons that are more alien in nature. You don't get we're now more removed from the classic kind of Abrahamic kind of religion depiction of demons, and we're much more into kind of I guess we could kind of say, at least in the film, they're kind of the nice kind of gothic punk kind of depiction of theme to these demons, and the realm they come from is, well, you get the feeling it's one of many different hells that are out there.
Have you seen Hellraiser 2, Hellbound?
Yes.
Because the depiction of hell in that is really interesting. It's a kind of a labyrinth, and it's got a kind of a weird monotony and uniformity to it that I guess Pinhead's scarification is suggestive of. Rather than being kind of cackling flames and what have you, being something that's very ordered.
They're definitely demons of like lust and decadence in that sense, because they're looking for ever more experiences and pleasures of the flesh that they can hopefully sate their thirst on. But well,
there's a line I can't remember if it's in the first or second film, but angels to some, demons to others. So because it's based on Clive Barker's mythology, and Clive Barker, although later in his work draws on notions of good and evil, earlier on it was much more amoral. And so that idea that for some people becoming a Cenobite was an end in itself, it wasn't a punishment, it was a form of transcendence. And even Frank, if you recall from the famous scene in the first film where he's ripped apart by hooks and says Jesus wept, and kind of licks his lips in a kind of like as though he's had the most amazing experience imaginable. So in that respect, whilst I love Hellraiser, I'm not sure whether it quite fits.
I think there's elements you can take from it, like obviously the puzzle box and different types of rituals, and obviously Frank's escape from hell is maybe interesting as an example, possibly for how maybe looking at a demon, how it escapes. Maybe Frank is more of an example of a larval that's escaping a dominion in Geist the Sin Eaters. So the larval didn't get sent to hell; it got sent to a part of the underworld. And so, the way his body gets rebuilt and in that wonderful, visceral, reverse stop motion animation.
It's an incredible scene.
So that's kind of fun.
I guess I actually think maybe Hellraiser 2 interesting.
Is also, yeah. I was also going to say, I think not Hellraiser 3, that's actually the poor one. It's Hellraiser 4, isn't it? Which is what's Hellraiser 4?
Hellraiser 4 is the one that across different
timelines.
Yeah. And so, it goes from the creation of the puzzle box to a space station.
And that's interesting because we're kind of maybe getting on to kind of a God Machine Chronicles kind of feel there, maybe. So, I guess you could plunder it for that.
I mean, Hellraiser 2, the kind of Lord of Hell or God of Hell, Leviathan, is a weird black geometric shape that has rays of dark light that sweep out over the labyrinth. And I think that if you want inspiration for the God Machine and what the God Machine could be, that is a fantastic example. And I think that if you look at the artwork from the God Machine Chronicles, the kind of twisted serpentine tower with an eye, it really reminded me of that. So I guess if you were interested in maybe using Inferno and combining it with God Machine, then Hellraiser would be perfect.
It could be an example of demons that have finally done the descent. They've descended somewhere and then start coming back for more.
Or the Cenobites could even be the angels of the God Machine.
They'd be very good for the angels of the God Machine. Or if you toned them down a bit, they could be a very interesting cult. So yes. if you tone down the flesh crafting, they'd be an interesting cult, but still with the whole pleasures of pain and so forth.
There's a really interesting one of the later sequels, which is called Hellraiser Deader, which is
my god,
worst names.
Ones. Yeah.
But it's actually got a really interesting concept in that people have found a way. It's like a kind of pleasure cult, but they found a way to cheat death so that they don't die and can't be taken to hell. And my research, because I actually wrote an encyclopedia article on the Cenobites, and my research into those films is that some of the later Hellraiser films were actually initially conceived as independent horror films that couldn't get funded. So they twisted them to make them fit with the Hellraiser mythos, and that was a way of getting them made. But potentially a cult that's found a way to take from demons without giving back, that's not upholding its side of the bargain or the pact, could be an interesting C group.
Random idea that I'm going to go with, which you can take from Hellraiser. If you want to use the puzzle boxes and you want to use more puzzle boxes that represents each type of sin, so maybe they open up gateways to different parts of hell. Is the puzzle boxes have different shapes, because of course you could relate the 9 circles of hell to platonic solids. So a tetrahedron, followed by an octahedron, a cube. Obviously, we've got etc., etc., etc. And that would be kind of cool because then you've got an item that each has a different kind of feel for each demon type.
I think that would work really well, but I think that for the majority of the players in Chronicles of Darkness who are probably familiar with Hellraiser in some way, you would want to change it enough that people didn't kind of get jarred out of the experience and think, oh, this is Hellraiser. So if you could find ways when they open it of something happening that subverted their expectations.
I guess you could do some combination with like Hellraiser mixed with a bit of, the Chaos Gods to add a bit of difference. Because actually, you could always look at Realms of Darkness and the Chaos books that they did, the Realms of Chaos books. I'm sure you could get a lot of fun out of reading the Slanesh book for ideas for Inferno.
Weirdly, the Chaos Gods, thinking about it, the only two that really lend themselves, at least at first glance, to Inferno and to Sins are Slanesh and Khorne.
You could almost say that Tzeentch could potentially be related to
greed,
knowledge, pride, and Nurgle is maybe possibly sloth.
Yeah, sloth would work.
And what's the other one? What's the other sin I'm trying to think of?
Gluttony?
Potentially, yeah.
But I don't know. Even though the Great Unclean One is obese, it's not clear that it's because it's been eaten, or I think it's because it's so bloated with gases.
Yeah,
as it's decaying.
Cool. We got two more. So, Rosemary's Baby. Oh, this is simple, really. I mean, it's a good example of a cult and the idea. I mean, again, whether this is really a story type of thing to you, a concept or a story to play through for a band of mortals who are trying to help someone, or is it the prelude to something and it's your background material to a cult and the chosen? The child of the devil type thing.
I mean, could you have it as a character who approaches the player characters, or is even one of the player characters who lost a child, and there's a sense of they were told that the child had died but didn't believe it, and they had these nightmares that something else had happened, and so that could be quite a strong plot hook.
Or you could be the child, and this is the story that's revealed through a series of flashbacks.
Yes, so you learn about, again, this I guess maybe links to some of the revelation in Mummy, that you learn about how you came to be, and in doing so realise what you are and what that might mean for you.
Yeah. And I guess Rosemary's Baby kind of also then ties in with the last one on our list, which is House of the Devil. Do you want to talk about House of the Devil?
So I think that really, if you want to go down the demonic pact route, the cult route, I think that the atmosphere of dread created by House of the Devil is one of the best in cinema. I think that for all the problems that you listed with regards to Rosemary's Baby and Starry Eyes, it might be problematic. I think that it would actually lend itself if we're going down the route of mortals. So the idea is someone is called to be the babysitter at a home and takes on the job and comes to realise there's something awful going on in the house. You could potentially have that as the seed for a one-shot.
Yes.
With then the friends of the person who's in the house. If she calls them and says, something's happening, I'm locked in, I need help. And they then have to get to the house, find a way in, try to figure out what's going on, try to get her out of harm's way. I think that in that respect, House of the Devil is brilliant source material, but maybe then be a springboard into an ongoing chronicle. Maybe that was one particular call all over the country.
The other thing I'll say, and obviously it's a major feature in why this is a good one. Again, it fits with one shots and stuff, or maybe flashbacks, and again fits with Rosemary's Baby, is because of the way it's the way it's been filmed, like with the type of cameras that were used and just all the right cues, is that House of the Devil really looks like looks like it's filmed from the time that it's set in, and it really picks up all the classic kind of 80s horror kind of cues.
Yeah, a friend of mine said that it looked like a long lost discovered classic from 1980s horror cinema. And I think that they managed to make it feel very much of the time. It slipped into kind of self-referentiality, or it takes itself very, very seriously. It's a very straight horror film. And it's all the more effective for it.
So we finished covering all the films and talking about Inferno, the World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness book. So, remarks on David. I think we're pretty happy that Inferno is still a very relevant book for Chronicles of Darkness, given that it's a new edition. There's been rules changes, but I don't think there's too much to be done if you wanted to update and make use of that book in current games.
I would agree entirely. I still think it's one of the best books that they've put out. I think there may be for making a second edition, especially in light of the God Machine and the mythology that's brought in, if they wanted to try and find a way in which they could connect the two. But I think it also works fine as its own self-contained realm of horror.
Yeah, I think it will definitely be something they should look at once Geist the Sin Eater's second edition is out, because I think that every time we see one of these game books come out, it gives you more clues on how you can make modifications to the previous edition to update it. And I think Geist is perhaps the closest, and we covered that when we were talking about the Possessed, and perhaps depending upon how in Geist they treat certain ghostly creatures and how they treat anchors, that might be also again there might be an option of playing a character which is actually a ghost, because in Geist that kind of would make sense. You could have other character types being ghosts, so
that would be fantastic.
That could be an idea of how they treat anchors. Might be a good way on how you treat like Malpraxis and all these other bits which make up the demons of the Inferno. But ultimately, demon. There's more than enough rules in all the Chronicles of Darkness books as it is to run immaterial spirits. So spirits of the Hyssal, spirits of that appearing mage from the astral realm. So running demons using some rule set even now is not impossible. I think the main task for a storyteller is really presenting demons in a story in a way that's interesting. I think for us, they're more interesting as being more of a puppet master and unseen threat, not, oh, look, it's a Cenobite walking around killing people.
Absolutely. I think it's much more interesting to see demons as forces that find moral weakness, whether it be in a vampire, a mage, or an ordinary mortal, and push them towards the various sins that they may be most susceptible to, rather than the kind of greater demon of corn, bloodthirster, flames, etc. I think that they're much more interesting as an insidious enemy.
So, then to wrap up, people getting in contact with us via the usual routes of darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. They can also contact us on Twitter @darkerdaysradio. We have a Facebook page, we have a Google Plus page, we have the blog. Then, David, they can get in contact with you and find out about events and book reviews and interviews at Twisted Tales. So
yes, we've got the blog, the Facebook account, and we're on Twitter @morejackanory.
Mm-hmm. And then if people are also interested in other things, obviously there's our friends at Midnight Express and also at Full Metal RPG, because they've now got a proper website up and running. And is there anything else coming up, David, events-wise, that's worth hearing about?
Yes, I've just put together the first event in the Midlands for Twisted Tales, which is going to be an evening of ghost stories at Keel Hall. That's going to take place on Monday, 21st of November, from 7:30 till 9:30 p.m. It's going to be in the tradition of M.R. James prior to Christmas. We're going to have 3 authors give readings of about 15 minutes each, followed by a panel discussion about ghost stories and a Q&A with the audience. And the authors we have are Stephen Volk, who's the BAFTA-winning writer of Ghostwatch, Afterlife and The Awakening, and the author of the award-nominated novella Whitstable. We've got Helen Marshall, author of the World Fantasy Award and Shirley Jackson Award-winning collection Gifts for the One Who Comes After, and Timothy Jarvis, author of The Wanderer. And I'll be comparing night and asking the questions, so I hope to see a few listeners there.
Great. Well, I think that's everything for this show. Yeah, I think that's it. So thank you for listening, and good night.
Good night.